we have a little slide that we're going to put up here. Now, the title of the session is The Power of Feedback. And I guess my feedback from the AV crew is that my headshot wasn't good enough to make the slide. However, that's not really very relevant because we've got three amazing ladies on stage for you. I've been humbled to be able to prepare this session for you with them. We're going to talk about the power of feedback. Now, I haven't been in the industry for so long, but when I came, I realized that I was a little bit of an oversharer. And I would tell people, wow, we've just had this really big escalation. And everybody used to look at me as if I was the only one that ever happened to. Because I guess you guys never get bad feedback from anybody, ever. I do. Sorry. Disillusionment. So we've put together, because we feel that we should look more at what we do with feedback, the way that we address it, how we deal with it, the intricacies, the difficulties that we have with it. So that's what we're going to spend the next 40 minutes on. I say 40 minutes because we started a little late. Don't worry, I will let you out on time for lunch. I realize that it's important. Before we do get into the session, I have a couple of little housekeeping things that I'd love to say. First of all, we have a very friendly Euro colleague here called Peggy who will be running the microphone around. If you have questions or comments at any phase in the session, please do feel free to let us know, raise your hand, and we'll come find you with a microphone. The second thing is that we at Euro also practice feedback culture. You have an app which you've surely all installed with a little feedback button at the end of this session. Please do take the time to complete the feedback because it allows us to make better content for you at the sessions next year. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, any constructive criticism, anything you would have loved to hear, please put it in there. Now, we're going to start off by question number 1, which is, how do you, in your organizations, deal with feedback when it comes through? Now, I realize that we could be talking about the good feedback. A little bit of a disclaimer, we're not really going to be talking about good feedback, okay? So we're going to be focusing on the bad stuff, the difficult stuff. Aideen, would you start us off?
Yeah, sure, thanks. So I think for us, when we get feedback in, and particularly the difficult stuff, what we have to remember is, when things go wrong, often it'll be human error, that has caused this. And, nobody likes to have to admit that they've made a mistake or, that they're wrong. And what we often find with feedback as well, particularly on the bad stuff, is we as owners of the business are often copied in on the feedback that will come in. And, our team, particularly where we are, we're in the Middle East, so we're very much a face-saving culture. And for the person that has maybe worked on a case and they've had bad feedback, they feel so bad already that, something has gone wrong for the client, but also they feel more embarrassed than when, we're brought into the loop and they're having to deal with us and they feel that their job could be at risk and things like that. And a couple of years ago, we had an employee engagement survey, and one of the feedbacks that we got was they felt that, as a company, we always erred in favor of the client. We were very client-focused when the bad feedback came in. So, taking that on board then, that if I look at myself as a manager, even owner of the business, I'm a very task-focused, orientated person. So for me, when there's a problem, it's all about focusing on the outcome, sorting out the problem as quickly as possible and coming up with a solution. It may not be the perfect solution or the ideal one, but it's finding some sort of a solution and getting that done. Whereas from time to time, I might tend to forget about the people side of things as well, and that maybe my team are feeling embarrassed, they might feel ashamed or something like that. So I think you kind of have to find a bit of kindness in there as well and think about them and supporting them. And then it's just making sure, what I always do is when there's a mistake or something goes wrong, I ask for a timeline. And I want to see what happened, on which date, itemize it all, put it down together, and we'll sit and we'll look at it. And if it's human error, hands up. It's our mistake, and then work really, really quickly to resolve it. Or if it isn't ours, we will push back as well and, make sure that our employees see that as owners, we're supporting them, we have their back to resolve it as best we can.
Thank you. Leah, is that how you would do that?
It's very similar. Something that I'd add is that for us, all of the feedback comes into the account managers. So for the field consultants and the people on the ground, it can be a bit like, oh, I have to deal with somebody senior, I've done something wrong. And so what we always do is take that to the direct manager, and they can sit and have a very calm discussion over what they feel. We also say, look, this is not a blame game. We are in this as a team. Everybody at Pack and Pex is working to the best of what we can do. So let's all just sit down, work out what's happened. We give a definite timeline to how long we want to get that feedback from, because I think the longer it goes on, the more uncomfortable a consultant or somebody can start to feel about what's happened with that.
Andrea?
Yeah, at IOR, I mean, we definitely value feedback, and we, are really committed to the customer experience. So, we try to tell everybody to be open. I mean, nobody wants to hear something bad about themselves, something bad about their consultant who was working on a program, but they need to be open. We tell them, put yourself in the eyes of the assignee. Maybe it was a difficult move, maybe they have children that are complaining. So what's the reason for that? Use your empathy, which is, a big buzzword for everybody in this industry. And, make sure you look at what went wrong, what could have been better, and, just make sure you approach it with an open mind, looking to what can we do in the future to make sure that this is avoided.
Thank you. Now, the advantage when you get put with 3 industry veterans, like these 3 ladies, is that there's a lot to learn. So I'm going to ask the question to you guys in the hope that you were maybe as negligent as I was. Have anybody ever heard of black box thinking? No. Somebody, not even a single hand? Ah. Okay. You were in the prep sessions, Peggy. That doesn't count. All right. Now, we came across something called black box thinking. And Leah, I would love it if you could give us a rundown of what that means and what that is, and especially what that means for how do we deal with feedback.
Yeah, so about 6 months ago, my hand would have been down also until Alistair Murray introduced me to this book.
We weren't going to say that, Leah. We were going to say it was your idea.
Go on, it's all my idea then. It's Black Box Thinking by Matthew Syed. The book explains a lot, but it's also on audio, so that's what I was doing, walking around and listening to him explain. He has some amazing TED Talks and YouTubes out there. So the black box thinking concept comes from the black box on an aeroplane, which records all of the data. So if something should go wrong, you have data to analyze. So companies such as Mercedes Formula One, Dyson, they use this and they say that failure is a good thing. So what can you do? As long as you break that failure, that feedback down to the smallest degree, you can start to build it up. You can start to see, are there patterns? Are there things that we could have done better? Is it something consistently that's going wrong? So failure can actually become our friends. And there are companies out there now that are setting up failure departments based on black box thinking, collecting all of the data. So it's not so bad to fail and get that negative feedback as long as you do something with it.
Thank you, Leah. Now, when we were speaking about this in the preparation sessions, we always came back to the sort of data analytics or the analytics of feedback. Aideen, what could you share in regards to the responsibilities that you have as management when it comes to that?
Yeah, so, anytime we have feedback, or particularly if there's an escalation or a complaint or something like that, we will record it and we'll do a whole root cause analysis to understand what's happened and what went wrong. And, we've put it all on a spreadsheet. In the past, we've now kind of more digitized. We've put it into a CRM system with what's happening on that. So then we would get together on a quarterly basis then to review that and understand, what has gone wrong. And in some cases, it's human error. In other cases, it's the system that's let you down. So maybe we've been too manual, asking clients to complete too many documents and things like that. So we've automated those as a result. And, it's trying to get better. As Leah said, you're just trying to get better all of the time. But, even as management as well, I just think it's really important that with feedback, it always has to be a two-way thing. And that, we as management are able to accept and take feedback from our employees as well. And, recently we started doing a set of live webinars ourselves at EER, and, you know, they say don't work with children and don't work with animals. Well, don't work with poll questions in a live webinar and stuff. It's awful. But we were doing a run through with our marketing team, and I was in my spiel and giving the whole thing. And next thing, all I heard out of the ether was, "I'm bored." And I was like, oh my God. It was the worst practice session I've ever done. And at that point, I would have given anything just to cancel the whole webinar. It was such a disaster. And then afterwards, she rang me in a state because she goes, I realized that I never should have said that in front of your team. She said, I'm really sorry, I've embarrassed you. And I was like, no, that was actually the best thing you could have done, because it made me vulnerable in, you know, the sight of my team. They were nervous about having to do it as well. And, you know, there's no point saying to me, oh yeah, you're doing brilliant, and then maybe giving harsh feedback to other people. Feedback has to be fair as well. And I think by treating me that way, it made me on an even par with everybody else as well.
Andrea, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, love this whole thing about black box thinking. I mean, I think a lot of us are doing it anyway, but having it have a name really kind of, and a purpose, and thinking about it from the, you know, black box on an airplane really kind of, you know, frames it for us. And I think it's really important that, you know, we are always analyzing everything that's gone wrong, even if we don't want to see it, creating new processes, making sure that, you know, this doesn't happen again, and, you know, breaking it down, finding trends, figuring out what we can do differently the next time, or how we change our process because this is happening over and over and over again. And even, I know we're not supposed to talk about positive feedback, but even sort of, you know, taking some of that positive feedback and, you know, being like, this is what's working, let's get this out there, and hopefully that will outweigh some of the negative side of things as well.
Something that I've heard both of you just say is sort of the principle of ownership, right? So as management and also within your teams. Aaliyah, how do you practice that within your organizations?
I think we, as a company, we need to own when we've made a mistake. I mean, it's part of our, you know, we want our clients, our customers to know that we are also taking full ownership, full responsibility when we have done something. We're not going to hide it. We're not going to not action it. We're going to be very open. As all of us, we're just going to say, yes, okay. And sometimes I find that when you have made a mistake is if you own it and you write, I am sorry, it is our fault, that goes a long way to people going, okay, we're happy to continue with this. You've said it was our fault, we've done something wrong, let's move on.
Aideen, how do you practice that?
What I'm always saying to my team is that, you know, if something goes wrong, most often you're not remembered for what went wrong, you'll be remembered for what you did to put it right. And people will always see, you know, the work that you do, and that's probably the most important thing. But from an ownership perspective, I just, you know, sometimes, you know, there could be 4 different parties involved in a relocation or something like that. And my tendency would be to just jump in and try and solve it because I can't wait for somebody else, and I think speed is of the essence when something goes wrong. But then probably there's a balance that has to be found too, because, you know, I think you call it scope creep and things like that, and how much should you be getting involved if it's not really your domain to be involved? Are you interfering and making things worse, you know? But own it straight away, get on it straight away. And, you know, recently we had some feedback from a third party. We'd been working on the client, and the survey score was quite poor. So they kind of came back to us and said, look, what happened here? You know, can you come back to us and let us know what's gone on? So we went and we started our investigations, and we spoke to our consultant, and she was gobsmacked because she'd actually built up this really good relationship with the assignee, and they now went out for coffee and things like that. And she just jumped ahead and picked up the phone to him straight away, going, why'd you give me such a bad review? You know, so before we had time to kind of look into everything. But actually he had said, oh no, he said, this review wasn't about you at all. He said, this was about the third party. But it immediately, you know, reflected on us straight away. So I think it's really important to not lose the head as soon as, you know, something does come in, investigated, you know, and then you can report back on it. But it's sometimes a little bit unfair that, you know, if there's 4 or 5 different parties involved in a relocation, often that survey comes back on the very last part of the service, which mightn't have gone well. You've done your good job, but that's not reflected.
Understood on that. Now, this was going to be my first moment of polling the audience. I've decided not to because I think you're all going to lie to me. I was going to ask you, when you've received feedback, have you ever ignored it? But of course, all of you are going to be like, no, wouldn't have done that. We have. All four of us have. Andrea, could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know, it's funny, I kind of taking this out of the relo world and thinking about an experience at a restaurant, right? You know, you go to a restaurant, you have a lousy experience, you write a bad review. You want that restaurant to acknowledge that, you know, regardless of whether you were a rowdy party and it was really your fault. You want that restaurant to acknowledge it. So, and if they don't, I'm never going back there again. So as much as we'd like to ignore feedback that we get, and sometimes you know from that very first call, this isn't going to go well. You know, we are going to have an escalation along the way, and that's what happens. I mean, it's always that assignee, you know, that's the one you want to ignore, the one who's been difficult all the way around. But you know what? You can't ignore it. As much as you want to ignore it, you have to at least address it. You can, with your team, put it aside, sort of say, we're not going to do anything about this, but we're going to placate the players to make sure that, you know, this is a customer service business, that the customer is always right. And so in my mind, and trust me, any of my colleagues that are sitting here can tell you I'm a hothead. And so bad feedback comes in and I will totally, she can't stop laughing. I'll totally be like, we're not going to do anything. This is not our fault. But calmer heads eventually prevail because you just cannot ignore if you want to continue the partnership, going forward. So,
do you feel like it's maybe less about ignoring it and more about putting it in perspective, Andrea?
I think, and then we will often do that. You know, we will acknowledge it and say, we will have analyzed the again with the timeline, what happened, and try to say, we understand this person was upset, but here are the things we did. I don't know what we could have done differently, and we feel sad that he's not happy or she's not happy, but on the other hand, this is what happened, and this is how what we did all along the way. One of the things we've actually started doing in our company is we've been sending pulse checks along the way, and that's really helped us a lot to early on, after the first meeting, it comes from management, how are things going? And this is a good place to be like, oh, I've got to turn it around, because you never know when somebody's going to have a big personality mismatch, right? And maybe that's usually apparent after the first, meeting. So we've really, these pulse checks have really been something that have helped us right. And again, that pulse checks came out of us acting on negative feedback and saying, how do we change this? How do we make this better?
Leah, do you have any thoughts on this?
It's strange. We tried the pulse checks and we just couldn't get a response. We even tried sending them by SMS, to the point where I was going to fit those little machines in the cars where it's the 3 smiley faces. Can you please tick these? No, nobody wanted to do that. Ignoring feedback? No, we can't do it. I was asked to do it once internally for the sake of a consultant not losing face. Top consultant never, ever, ever got bad scores. So they said, please, just don't tell this person. Don't tell them, because it's going to take me 3 weeks to calm them down. And then they're going to refuse to take any more files with this company, and it's just not going to happen. So I was like, okay, they know this person better. If they're going to just deal with it maybe in a weekly checkup, or just say, okay, so something happens. So I did. I ignored the feedback. I hid it. But I recorded it on the system. I hid it from the consultant, but I recorded it on the system. In her annual review, she saw it. She absolutely blew up with us and said, why did you hide it from me? We were like, well, we thought you were going to take it really badly because you're so good. And she was like, no, I need to know. That's how I learn. So I've never hidden it again. I did it once. It backfired.
Aideen, any thoughts?
I would love to ignore some feedback from time to time, but you can't. I agree that you can't. But Maybe a different spin on it was kind of roles reversed. We had a client, a really large client that was bringing in a lot of revenue for us, but they were a very, very difficult client. And, afterwards, looking back, I would actually say they were quite toxic. But, we'd be getting into there might be frank discussions happening and they'd be telling us to stick to eating potatoes. That's all we were good at. And, we'd get all this kind of stuff. But in one situation, we had an assignee and things just weren't going well from him with this settling in. And, he contacted the client account manager. And on an email, he'd said to her that if she didn't sort this out, he was going to chop her head off. And this was, what we had done. So anyway, I went straight to the client, had a meeting with the HR department, and they just laughed, about it when we brought that feedback in, and nothing changed. And I think what we learned from that is for too long, we kind of, pandered to them. They were just really, really difficult. And we should have said goodbye to that client a lot sooner, because we lost one employee because she just hated working with them as well. It was so stressful. They'd be effing and blinding at you in meetings. They'd be throwing paper across the table at us and all of that. And it was horrible. And, I have another one at the moment who, if night follows day, he's complaining to us. So what we're ready to now say is, we're probably not the right company for you. We don't seem to be able to meet your needs. So in the nicest possible way, I think it's time for us to move forward and him to move on. And
I feel like we could probably fill a whole conference on toxic clients. I don't quite think the Euroboard's going to agree with me doing that. So when we receive feedback, it obviously causes quite some disruption to the teams and the workflows. Leah, how do you at Pack and Pex go ahead in dealing with sort of the disruption of your productivity that occurs?
Okay, so as account managers, we have a bit of a saying where it is no negative feedback, no service failure should be a surprise to us. So in our system, we actually started to record escalations, negative emails, and saving, so that when the feedback did come in and we could open that file for that particular client, the red flag is already up. It's like, we know what's happened. So that then saves us the time. We don't have to start the investigation from the beginning. We are aware. So we ask our teams, come forward if you're in the car for the first time with the client. Do you have a feeling that this is not going to go well? Any negative emails, send them up to the account manager. So we can then go back to the RMC or the direct HR and say, something is potentially wrong here and is going to happen. So it's a big time saver already knowing that something's going to happen. But again, we put a process into place to say, when we do have a negative feedback, this is the process we want you to follow. Within 24 hours, we want the direct lead and the people involved to come back with exactly what they feel has happened, with a timeline, be as detailed as possible for us. The account manager then fully reviews it. I think we have to keep the number of people involved in doing the work on finding out what has happened in that feedback to a minimum.
Andrea.
There's nothing worse than opening up your email and seeing in that subject line, service failure. And you just think, oh, time suck. That's the first thing I think. And unfortunately, that is what happens. And we also have a process and do the 24-hour, resolution, or at least, making sure we get the facts there. But it takes a lot of people's time. We've got a director of customer experience who's overseeing all the quality. She's involved. The account manager's involved. The lead for that account, operational lead for the account is involved. The program manager, the DSC. So, we kind of have to get everybody's input, start from the beginning and get everybody's input before we can move forward with, kind of giving our root cause analysis of what happened. And sometimes it's quick, like it was expected, and so some of that stuff has already been documented, and so it's a little bit easier to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But other times it's not as black and white, and it just seems like it's like pulling teeth to get the information and try to figure out the best way forward. And then of course, if the client comes back with yes, but, then it's almost like it starts the process all over again. And as much as I'd love to, sometimes I feel like we do have too many people involved, but in that takes even more time because who writes an email off of this? But I think in the beginning, we need more people involved, and then we kind of hope that people will kind of back them out of it once we have the facts from them, so that we're not, we're only not wasting, it's never a waste. we're only utilizing a few people's time as we delve into this very important escalation, so.
Going to go a little bit off topic here. Aideen, when you see that service failure email come in first thing in the morning, do you ever wish that you had a sort of a preset layer of ChatGPT generated replies that you could just swoosh in and that solved it all? Or?
Well, after yesterday's presentation, that's going to be possible. So, yeah, that will be good. But look, it'll depend on the severity as well of the issue that's coming in, and you're either in a full-scale crisis management or it's something that can be handled quite quickly. But I think for us, the account manager, as I said earlier, for me it's all about the speed, getting it dealt with as quickly as possible, so it does take a person out of their day-to-day work to get that done. And we're a small business, so we don't have complaint departments and things like that. Our team leader is our team leader, she's an account manager, she's complaints manager, and all of those things. And then you have to, do all the root cause analysis, you're recording everything. But yeah, depending on what it is, it's all hands on deck, I remember a few years ago, it was a Friday evening, we were just about finishing, and we were doing a case where somebody was getting ready to move in, sign a contract on a property, only to realize when they'd been viewing the properties, they had seen 2 apartments on the same floor, and we had gone through a contract for the wrong apartment, just as they were about to move in. So that was crisis, and that was all hands on deck, getting that sorted out and everything. So each case is different. But you have to be, what was it? Agile.
Agile.
Yeah.
Agile, yeah. Now, I understand that a large part of it, and mind you, we haven't done anything in the session on sort of the quantitative approach and how you gather feedback, be it questionnaires, et cetera, because we wanted to focus very much on sort of how it's dealt with and how it's digested within the organization. But of course, a big part that comes with getting feedback is the fact that you hope that it gives you some sort of insight into what you could do differently or better. So, Andrea, how has feedback that you've received at IOR given you the possibility to change, amend, implement, innovate?
Well, first of all, we're often, we will take a look at something, especially if it's not a one-off and it's a trend, and we really will change a process, whether it's a lease review process or the way, the DSCs are handling a certain settling in task or whatnot. But we've also been able to identify a trend. We had some VIPs who often seemed to be complaining that they didn't feel like they were getting the VIP treatment. Well, I'm sure everybody in this room knows every authorization comes in and it's a VIP or an EVIP or a VVVVVIP, and you're like, okay, well, what does that mean, and what are you willing to do for that? But we really feel like we give best-in-class service all the time, right? We treat everybody like a VIP. You could be an entry-level person, or you could be, the owner of the biggest company in the world, and we want to make sure our consultants are treating everybody like they're a VIP. But we recognize that those VIPs do, at times need a little extra help. So we developed sort of a VIP upgrade service, which is a lot more concierge-driven, very, very much more hands-on, giving the consultant the time to really, really put the care into what needs to be done so that this person does feel special. So we were, we had a really positive outcome from the negative feedback, which was we were able to create another service line that we can offer to clients who want to ensure that their VVVVIPs are being treated better than, our normal white glove service.
Leah?
For us, when we started to go into multiple countries, by recording what had happened and going back to the black box thinking of recording by each consultant, we were able to learn, okay, will this also help us in Italy? It's working in Switzerland. We've had this negative feedback. We've made a correction. Will it work here? We could see patterns of where we were getting similar issues. So was it due to the client? Was it a change we had to make internally? Was it something we had to take back to the client and say, I think this package is not quite working It's not fitting in this area, or it's working here. So I think by just breaking everything down, looking closely, seeing patterns, implementing where we can make improvements, being very clear. And the one thing that we did realize, that if you try to fix everything in one email, and you keep taking the feedback and going, we need to correct that here, you're then sending out a 12-page email, because everybody thinks their little thing is important. So it's just, it gives us the idea now to actually really look at what we need to make the improvements on.
Is there anybody in the room that would like to share, for example, an experience on feedback you've received that has helped you do something significant in your organization? Francine's all ready to go. We didn't plant her, I promise.
Well, as soon as you were talking, it's turned on, maybe?
It's on.
It's on. Okay. I wanted to share one experience that we had many years ago, and it's all down to policies and procedures, and your procedures when you do get a complaint. It was a Monday morning. There was a consultant who was due to go out. It was an assignee. She hadn't met him before, so it was first time. She phoned in sick. And as you can imagine, there was a bit of a kerfuffle in the office. But the procedure was that a senior person would go instead of the consultant. And I happened to be the one who was able to free and to go. So the account manager called the assignee and said, look, I'm sorry, your consultant is ill, or one of our management team is going to meet you, but she will be about another hour. So I get the itinerary that the consultant had prepared, and I go in the car and arrive in the hotel to meet the assignee, who you can feel he is about to boil over. He's not a happy man at all. So I sit him down and I explained to him what happened, and told him who I was, that I was the boss, and that I was here to try and, help and make a good day for him. So off we set, and we have the itinerary, and I show him a number of apartments. And halfway through the afternoon, and I can remember it so well, we're driving down this road, and he turns to me and he said, Francine, you must compliment you. You turned this around very well. And it's down again to what policies and procedures you have, and that you have a backup if there's a complaint.
Yep.
Okay?
Very good.
Thank you very much. Aideen, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree with that, having the policies and procedures. And, I think anyone here who is EGQS certified as well, that's certainly a very big part of it, that you have those policies and procedures in place, and they are tested, and everything from, as soon as that comes in, the quick turnaround, the 2-hour response time, making sure you're going back to them with regular updates and all of that. And, I think, again, kind of going back to what Leo was saying about different countries and different things, we find that as well in the Middle East, and there's all sorts of cultural nuances. And sometimes, particularly with Saudi, some clients were getting frustrated that maybe getting information back can be very slow and it can take a couple of days. And when we looked into all of this, it's, culturally, they just don't want to tell you something until they have an answer and the full information to give to you. Whereas what we're always trying to saying is, just get back to them. You don't have to have the answer, but make sure they're hearing from you regularly so they know you haven't forgotten about them. They know they've been heard and that we've understood what the issue is and we can fix it.
So we've just spoken about what insights we have to possibly look at our performance and what we can do when it goes wrong. But when we were preparing this, we very quickly came to the fact that if you do something well with your feedback, then maybe you even have an opportunity to capitalize on it. So, Andrea, have you ever done that?
Well, we have, and then I would say even, our VIP program that we put together was a way we capitalized on it. I mean, I think we've learned some great lessons along the way, and I kind of am reminded by what you have just said right here, and about all the cultural differences. And, we're very fortunate because we also have a cultural training and a language training department. So we kind of have used our cultural training to certainly help our consultants understand how do you work with different cultures, especially when you have a certain company of a nationality going into one area, and you see a lot of escalations because there's just a mismatch of communication. So we are able to utilize our cultural training in order to teach our consultants the best way to coordinate that. But we can also take some of our cultural training and we can offer that to the client and say, listen, would it be helpful if we put together some kind of a webinar so that, we can, help your employees understand what to expect in the U.S. And I know a lot of people get cultural training, but a lot of people don't get cultural training. And just a small webinar that we can put together, an hour or two, with the expertise that we have, is a really great way for us to be able to kind of capitalize on that feedback and make sure that going forward, the communication is, is much smoother. And we've definitely seen, when we do that, we've definitely seen a decrease in escalations within that population of people. So that's one of the ways we've done that.
Is there anybody in the room that could share anything on changes you've made to maybe your business lines or your service delivery that have helped you yield a higher outcome on an existing service after feedback? Really, guys? Not even one? Fine. Leah.
I think one of the things we did is, and a lot of us struggle with these one-day packages, is in certain areas we were like, you need to fit this package in this country for these people, and it was failing and failing and failing. So we actually were able, it's very difficult, but with a direct client, to have a conversation of, can we change the package? Can we look at it? Can we start to give options? We think this would work better. And then the noise starts to go away and people are happier. And you think, okay, by just looking, trying to put that square peg in a round hole and hammering it, it's just not going to work. So let's stop, start again. We had happy clients. We continued to work in that way. And I think just using that, the information we get back as well, what you were saying about training people, we try to train our team. Number of us, we get a feedback and they go, it was the client. Okay, yeah, it was the client, but why? Or was it that the family weren't happy about? Was it this? So we started to put training onto our system. We have an academy of why are moves failing? Why is the feedback negative, and starting to record all of that negativity that comes, which then helps our teams to go, okay, I understand. They've moved from a totally different country. They've got that. Because, say, if we take Switzerland, a lot of our team are Swiss. So to them, it's normal to live in this way or do something. So we have to train and help each other with that.
Aideen?
Yeah, I mean, we do capitalize on feedback, and I think probably everybody does, whether it's down to things like NPS scores and satisfaction scores, and you're putting that out publicly, maybe on your websites, your social media, you're sharing it as part of the RFP processes as well, and doing that. And I think it's fine to do that as long as you're doing it, with integrity and ethically as well, and even things like testimonials, I would ignore things maybe if you look at TripAdvisors and things like that. I might often ignore those because you don't know who's doing those. But I think if you're doing testimonials where you have the person's name, you have the company and things like that, it's genuine and bona fide, and you can use all of those. And, even at an employee level, again, we've had a recent employee engagement survey, and one of the things that came back is they're not happy with the performance management and the KPIs and all of that. So we've got together and brought them in now, and we said, okay, we had put it together, so we say, now you put it together and tell us what you want it to be, and get their input and buy-in and doing it that and turning it around. And, I think you always have to celebrate the good things as well, and we would celebrate the good feedback. We have a bell in the office, so when something good happens, that person goes and rings the bell. There's a round of applause from everybody, and we do bi-monthly rockstar meetings as well, and we call out the good feedback in particular, and read out those comments that have come from the employees. They just love that, and just to get that kind of public recognition as well, yeah, they feel great about it. So we do capitalize on it, and I think that's fine.
Are there any questions on this from the audience, on this or anything we've discussed before? Somebody behind you, Peggy?
Hi, I'm Rita Hernandez from Premier DS. I just wanted to add that we, this year, implemented an incentive program for our coordinators and for our consultants. So every month, we compile all of the results, and there's winners. There's team winners. We created teams for the different supervisors who manage different client portfolio. And we give an incentive to the consultant that got the most feedback in the region out of almost 200 consultants. And we give an incentive to the team that got the most, and then the coordinator that got the most. So that has helped us a lot. We celebrate them. We show off in social media, also internally within the company. And I think they really value that.
Can I ask you a question on that? Is that a monetary incentive?
It is. We are actually, because we just implemented it, we're also discussing maybe we do half day off for those full-timers, because that doesn't impact the consultants. With the consultants, we've viewed that it would be, monetary would be a better incentive. But with our full-timers, our coordinators and the supervisors, because they also win the prize as part of the team, that we would contemplate maybe time off, maybe, half a PTO day or something like that versus money, and give them that option.
We do the same, Sophie. We have a monetary incentive. So every score that comes in, some can be out of 5, some can be out of 9. It depends who's done the scoring, sent out the survey. We bring all that back in-house, convert it to a pack and peck scoring, and then our consultants get their bonuses based on their positive scores for the year. Their annual bonuses as an incentive for that.
Yeah, we did the same as well, and one girl was a clear winner. And we were kind of saying afterwards, how did you do it? And what she did is before she sent the survey, she picked up the phone to them and she said, look, everything's finished, would you mind, really appreciate if you could do a quick survey for me? Yeah. And she'd send it to them and they would do it in response, and she just drove up her response rates. It was great.
Something we're looking at now, though, is we all know how difficult it is to get feedbacks back. And so you have some consultants that work and they do an amazing, amazing job, but they're not surveyed. The company decide we're not going to survey, is maybe to start collecting the emails, looking at the positive comments that come in as well, and adding that in on top. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because those, you can just take so much information from those emails, but they don't count towards your final scoring.
Anybody else? Yes, somebody right at the back. Michelle. Could you meet us halfway? That's amazing. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Closer. Just bring it up a little closer.
I get nervous. Can you hear me now? Okay. So kind of following up on the feedback that you're sharing with your teams, are your teams sharing with you, and are you sharing with your clients the positive feedback that they are receiving on site?
Yes.
And if you're not, you should.
Yes.
Andrea, do you have something to say to that?
Yeah, and that's a really great point. And our program managers, when they get positive feedback about a consultant, they share it with the entire team in our office, and our marketing team, who keeps kind of a tracker of all the positive feedback. We will do once a week a Thursday testimonial or Tuesday testimonial where we'll put some of that feedback on our social media. We make sure when we're doing an ABR for once a year that we're popping in all the great things that have been said. But in particular, we've been working with a client who has a very difficult population of people who seem to not always be content. So it seems like we're getting so many negative things back from them. But what it really turns out is that we've been tracking the positive comments as well. And the positive comments far outweigh the negative comments. So, we turned it around and said, we understand and we're going to work on these things and make it right. But also, you've got a lot of people that are really, really happy with what we're doing. And so it's really important to track that and, make sure that you're providing that so that it can outweigh. I always say that 1 out of 5, right? That 1 brings you down so far. You hit that 1, and it brings that overall number down so far. So it's really important to make sure that the positive feedback is shared as well.
Leah, is there any advice that you could give the group or your peers or colleagues on feedback and how to deal with it? If you had to say, this is the thing that's helped me most, what would that be?
Gather as much of it as possible, and also to get as much feedback from the consultants who are working for us, what has happened, where they're going, and break that feedback down and use it, don't ignore it. We have now set up a small team, a small working team, and through this year, what we're actually going to do is start really breaking down this feedback we're getting, looking for patterns, using it, reporting it back to our customers, and really making that negative feedback become our friend and let it work for us.
Aideen?
Yep, deal with it quickly once you get that feedback. I think it's really important. And then it also goes down to your audience, you know, who are you talking to? How are they going to take that feedback? And, you know, if it's employees, for example, I mean, for me, it's always you take it off the floor. That is never, ever discussed publicly or anything like that. It's done off the floor. And, you know, very young employees, you know, they're used to kind of a digital world and things like that, so they want everything quickly. There's maybe more older people like myself, you know, that maybe I can take it quite directly and I just want to be told because I'm task orientated and that kind of thing. So I think you have to tailor how you're giving it. But for us, I will have my examples, you know, and I'll be able to provide evidence what it's related to and talk about it like that, but definitely off the floor and done very quickly.
Andrea?
I think being proactive, and like I said, those pulse checks are really helping us kind of bring down the negativity, you know, in the longer program. We have often received feedback. Thank you so much for changing the consultant. They really turned it around. And so definitely trying to be proactive is something that we're really working hard on doing. But when you receive negative feedback, try not to be a hothead. Keep an open mind, look at all the things that happened, and, you know, again, there's so much to be learned, and our service delivery is going to be so much better if we really embrace it, break it down, and really figure out how to handle it. It's going to keep our strength within our partnership, and it's going to keep us as a provider that people want to keep coming back to, because we took the negative feedback, we dealt with it, we fixed it, and everybody moved on. So,
Thank you. There's two little things that, or two little nuggets that we would love to sort of send you off with in a minute. When I was preparing the session, I came across a good friend who's actually ex-military. And he said to me, so if remember when you look at feedback, it's not about defending everything, because if you defend everything, you protect nothing. Now, everybody that knows me a little bit, there's a few here, know that I can definitely be quite hot-headed and definitely quite defensive. So if there's some sort of motivation that we can give you to step back, be reassured that all of the feedback you received is really never personal, and that's especially something that we should continue to sort of filter through our teams to make sure that we empower our colleagues and our staff to make sure that they can also remove themselves from specific situations, even though they may feel very defensive about something that has happened. The second thing that we came across, and we feel quite strongly about this, is that we as an industry have moved away from fierce competition. Partially, I get it. But towards collaboration. And I think that it would be great if we all had more open and better communication with each other about this. Something you're experiencing, I'm sure there's somebody else in the room that has had a similar experience. If you're seeing somebody come to you with an escalation, don't make them feel like the idiot that's got one. Make them feel like, how can we help you to be better at that, right? In the end, we are an industry, we represent quite a strong market for all of us, so let's help each other get better rather than be negative about that. With that, I would love it if you could give a really loud round of applause to my great panel.